Welcome back, and we're up to San Jose. The San Jose Sharks are an interesting bunch. So before we get to what they're going to do in the offseason, the question for Doug Wilson is simple. Was this just like a nightmare season that they don't have to worry about going forward, or is this a sign of things to come? They were 29, 36, and 5 at the time of the pause, 63 points. Last season, they were 46, 27, and 9, 101 points, went to the conference finals. We don't need to get into how. 2017, 2018, they were 45, 27, and 10 with 100 points. So pretty darn good team coming into this year, and then it all just sort of fell apart. Now, last year, during the summer, what threw us wasn't just the Karlsson contract, it was who left. And it was the idea of, they're losing some depth up front, and they lost their goal scorer, Pavelski. And then what happened this season that it's kind of easy to forget is they lost Logan Couture for a large portion of this year. And while things weren't going great, if you lose Logan Couture, it's going to get a lot worse. So as poorly as San Jose's played, and I don't think there's a San Jose Sharks fan who right now is trying to argue that they played well, as poorly as they played, there's the argument that, next year there should be somewhat of a bounce back. How much? That's the question mark. I don't think they get back to 100-point status, but I do think they underachieved this year. Now, the other problem is goaltending. We've had this discussion 2 years in a row now. Martin Jones, his stats have been poor. Now, if you want to say, well, it's not Jones, it's the blue line, then okay. The problem is you've got Karlsson, Burns, Vlasic. You've got a name blue line, whether or not it's a great one. That's not for a discussion. What is, though, is how do you fix it? So if the problem is the defense on the blue line, how do you fix it? So if you're going to throw the blame at Erik Karlsson, if you're going to throw the blame at Brent Burns defensively, then how do you fix that? Because Vlasic was there to offset things. Šimek is there to offset things as well defensively. And if that's not working, that's a problem. Now, when you look at their UFA list for this summer, Melker Karlsson is at the top of it. Melker is not going to get a huge raise anywhere else, but he may want out. Maybe he wants out of San Jose. But if San Jose decides to keep him, about $1 million a year should probably get it done. Joe Thornton, if he wants to play, San Jose will have him around. If he decides he's finished, then he's finished. But he's said publicly already he wants to stick around and play next year. He'll play as long as they'll have him. Nason's been a pretty good pickup for San Jose, and certainly Sharks fans are very sold on him. And I would think you sign him and keep him around for depth. Tim Heed, I don't mind Heed. I think Heed's good as a number 7 option. I think he can step in as a top 6 here and there. If he's stretched too thin, that's where you start seeing the holes in his game. But as long as he's used sparingly, I think like an Alex Biega type is how I see Tim Heed. And, as long as he's being used properly, he's fine. Brandon Davidson and Aaron Dell. And Aaron Dell's an interesting storyline in that you don't really have a goaltender in the minors right now for San Jose who looks ready to come up and take a job. So they're going to have to either re-sign Dell and say, we're going with Jones and Dell as our tandem again, which is kind of crazy, or you let Dell go, and he was the better of the 2 goaltenders this season. So that might be kind of crazy as well. That's why there's a lot of speculation at the deadline about whether or not Aaron Dell would get traded, and he didn't. Now, on the RFA side, LeBanc, he's got arbitration rights, so he signed the very team-friendly $1 million a year deal for that 1 year last summer. And as team-friendly as that was, you have to think this summer they'll pay him back. So he has to make, what, $3 or $4 million? You've got to think at minimum, $3 or $4 million. So the fact that they have $66.6 million spent for next year, it looks like they have a lot of money. But it depends on what these players want to stick around, and you still have to fill out your roster. Shellman is a restricted free agent this summer. I like Shellman a lot. Suomela and Middleton, and they all have arbitration rates. And again, we don't know how arbitration is going to work in this very squashed offseason we're likely to see in the early fall. So, yeah, we'll see what happens with LeBanc's contract. We'll see if Thornton comes back. You have to think Thornton probably makes $1 million if he comes back. So that's $67.6 million. And LeBanc, if he gets $4 or $5 million, you're then already up into the low to mid 70s, and you've still got other players you need to replace. So there's some cap space there if they decide to add a forward. They can likely do that. But when we get into contracts, Erik Karlsson's $11.5 million a year cap hit right until 2027. it really stands out. You've got 7 more years of Erik Karlsson under contract at $11.5 million as a cap hit. And I don't know that you can justify that now, and I don't see how we justify that later. Karlsson's always going to have an injury risk. Karlsson, as great as he is, and he still is, he is not the same player now that he was in, say, 2016. He's not the same player that he was when he was, up there for Norris consideration. And when he wouldn't win, people would say he got ripped off. He's not the same player. Now, on the good side of things, Doug Wilson got a great contract out of Šimek, who had $2.25 million for 4 years. That's a good contract. But again, they have a lot of money tied up on that blue line, and it's a blue line that when we look at it and we look at the stats, we can say it's just not performing up to what you want, considering how much money you're spending on it. So Karlsson is the worst contract. And the fact that they signed him to that $11.5 million a year for 8 years, and that they let other players go, that may very well be part of the reason why we see a 38-point drop. And of course, if they played a full 82 games, it would have been more like a 25-point drop, but it's still a huge drop. And then it's a matter of him having a bounce-back season, maybe this huge period of time where nobody's playing. Maybe that benefits a guy like Karlsson, who's got aches and pains that are bugging him all the time. Maybe it means that the next season he'll be good to go and he can play a full 82 and he can get back to that Norris level that he was at 3 years ago. But I don't know. I really don't know. There are a lot of question marks here. So that's $66.6 million spent according to Cap Friendly for next season. It's a lot, but it's not as much as some other teams. So they're not as cap strapped as some other teams. The problem again being you've got to sign guys and have a full lineup out there. Rookie watch, it is an issue for San Jose. San Jose doesn't have anybody who looks like they're going to be the next guy. So Couture is their leader up front. You got Karlsson and Burns on the blue line. But it is an issue that with a team that's been so good for so long, they haven't had those blue chip prospects to develop into those top-notch players. So, Daniil, you're taken. I have on my list because he looked half decent in the preseason this year, and I think he'll be given every opportunity. Joachim Blichfield is going to get a chance. Sasha Himilevsky is going to get a chance. Maxim Latunov. Latunov has restricted free agency this coming summer. I didn't put him under RFAs because he only played like 3 games. But Latunov, of the 4 names on the board there, he's the one that I think they're kind of counting on. They had sort of carved out a spot in the lineup for Latunov for this year, and it didn't really work out. He ended up in the minors, and that left them scrambling, and thus the signing of Marleau. I don't think there was any plan to bring back Marleau until Doug Wilson realized, hey, some of these kids I'm counting on aren't quite ready yet. And it goes back to the video I did today on prospect pools and how until a prospect has played in the NHL, we just don't know. And in some cases with a player from Europe, especially if that player's played only in European leagues before getting that chance to play in the NHL, you don't know how they're going to do on smaller ice. You don't know how they're going to do with a different style of game. So it is my fervent hope that we see San Jose get at least a little bit better next year. It has been a bewildering season in that Anaheim, LA, and San Jose all fell out of relevance. They all fell into obscurity. The Šimek contract is great. The Karlsson contract is going to continue to be a problem. When you look at this group, like so, say for instance Thornton retires this summer. Joe Thornton says, all right, well, you know what? I was thinking about it and I'm going to retire. Who replaces him? Who replaces what he brings to that locker room? And I don't think anybody can. So for San Jose, this is a team that needs to either go through that rebuild process, which I think most of us can agree is probably the smartest move. But Doug Wilson's already said he doesn't want to move anybody out of the core. He's not interested in a rebuild. So does a retool happen? Does Doug Wilson take a look at this team during the summer and say, you know what? All right. And he sends out a notice, a letter to all season ticket holders saying, okay, we're going to have to do some sort of a retool here, and we're going to be probably pretty crappy this coming season, but it's with the idea of being much better a couple years from now. San Jose is a team that could really benefit from a top-notch prospect in their system. We look at teams that might need Lafreniere. San Jose definitely did, and the fact that the number 1 draft pick that they had this year is the property of the Ottawa Senators, it's really something that could bite them for a decade. For a decade. If that becomes the number one pick and Lafreniere goes to Ottawa, that is a move that becomes even more horrible for them and for their future. Karlsson's at 11.5 million, and meanwhile Ottawa would have Lafreniere on an entry level contract for 3 years, and you don't imagine he'd make 11.5 million 3 years later. But even if he did, he'd look pretty good on an entry level contract for the San Jose Sharks for 3 years. They did get back a first round draft pick from Tampa. I thought that was a pretty smart move by them. And yes, it's going to be later in that first round, but it's still a pretty smart move for them overall, because they need prospects, and the 2020 draft pool is supposed to be pretty good. But for San Jose, we'll see. So the question I have for you guys is, as we go into the idea of the offseason for San Jose, which of the UFAs do they need to keep? Which RFA could potentially be a stumbling block? Could LeBanc be that stumbling block? Could LeBanc say, you know what, I want my money this year. I gave you guys a team-friendly deal last year. I want a deal. Or do they already have that? Did Doug Wilson tell him last summer, hey, take this team-friendly deal right now. I will give you what you're worth next summer. And does that contract then eat into their opportunity to make things better over the short term? San Jose, definitely at a crossroads. I'd be interested to know what you guys think in the comment section below regarding the San Jose Sharks, their future, their present, and how to fix it. Because that 63 points, that below 500 standing that they have right now, if that's the real Sharks, if we're not going to see them get better next year when people are healthy and, whatever moves they make this summer, if this is the reality now, something's got to change. Let me know what you guys think. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And remember, in this day and age, be safe, stay home when you can, keep your hands clean, and everybody be nice to each other. How about that at the end of this? Thank you guys so much for everything. I will talk to you again soon.